Welcome to Let's Talk Democracy, the show where we have meaningful conversations on democracy. I'm your host, Tina Johnson. And each week, we're joined by people who are doing the hard work of building healthy democratic environments. With insightful guests, expert advice, and thought-provoking conversations, we dive deep into the heart of democracy. Whether you're here to learn or to get inspired, we've got something for you. Let's jump in and explore today's episode. At its core, democracy is about the power of the people. Every voice matters. Today, we're highlighting the importance of grounding decisions and actions in the lived experiences of community members rather than relying solely on abstract frameworks. We'll discuss how engaging communities in the creation of real-world solutions is key to creating a society that is vibrant and inclusive. By empowering communities to actively shape the systems that affect their lives, we foster a society built on equality, justice, and lasting change. This episode dives into the necessity of grassroots participation and the reality that without it, building transformational change is impossible. In order to understand our current political moment, it's crucial that we explore the role of community in designing, planning, and implementing social and political change. Together, we'll dive into what it means to build bridges, how we can create spaces of mutual learning, respect, and collaboration. When we talk about democracy, the first step should always be to ground our efforts in the wisdom of the community. Democracy at its best relies on the wisdom of its citizens. And when that wisdom is paired with academic frameworks, not replaced by them, we open the door to more just and equitable forms of governance. Too often, however, academic theory speaks over community voices instead of working alongside them. In today's episode, I'm joined by Chris Rogers, an educator, cultural worker from Chester, Pennsylvania. He's also a visiting assistant professor in the writing program at Haverford College and the founder of We Win From Within. Together, we will be in conversation exploring what it really means to build bridges and how embracing community wisdom can reshape how we engage, listen, and learn to create transformative change. So let's jump in and explore these ideas and much more in our conversation today. Hey, Chris, thanks for joining me on my podcast. I'm really excited to talk to you. It's been such a long time. I think the last time I saw you was in 2013 in Chester, right before I moved to Washington, D.C. I think it's when you and Alonzo took me out till 6:00 in the morning. I didn't
Where did
even
we
know that.
go?
We went to some little bar that all the casino people go to.
Oh, Gens.
Yeah.
That's my dad's old bar.
Well, I didn't know I could stay out till 6:00 in the morning. I remember you saying to me, I'm like, "What time is it?" You're like, "Don't look at your clock. Don't look out the door." But it was fun. I had a good
No,
time.
because the casino shift people get off at 2.
Mm.
So the bar is supposed to close at 2, but you know how Chester is. So they was able to create a third shift for all the casino workers.
Well, lucky for us, Alonzo was a casino worker at the time because that's how we got
Yep.
in. Yeah, I was thinking to myself, if I had only known this was here, maybe I wouldn't be going to DC. But since then, you've gone on and you've finished your master's and then your PhD. So you were at Villanova, I think, for your
So my
master's?
undergrad's at Villanova. I graduated from
Okay.
there in 2010. So 2013, I am finishing up at the University of Pennsylvania my master's.
Now you are a PhD working at
Yeah,
Haverford.
Christopher
Oh,
R. Rogers, PhD. I finished that in December of 2023 as I turned in my final dissertation. The program is called Reading, Writing, and Literacy.
what's the focus of the topic?
Oh, there's a good story behind that. So the name of the dissertation is called Storing A Black Village Poetics of Landscapes and Literacies in West Philadelphia. Where it starts from my master's defense, which was done in 2013 when we were still in Chester, maybe around the same time we were at that bar. And the conversation that I had to defend my master's thesis. I was living in Sun Hill, 1510 Washington Avenue. We eventually sold that home. I was writing my master's thesis while living in Chester, and I'm writing about how we transform Black education. As you know, you go into school, you're trying to figure out, okay, yes, we want to change things. And I'm writing about radical and revolutionary approaches, or what I believe to be revolutionary approaches to transforming Black education. And while I'm doing that at home, it's a lot of late nights. I got new neighbors at the time. You know how Chester is. It's like I don't really know them, but through Chester, I kind of know them. You know what I mean? In terms of like 1, 2 degrees away. I think one of the brothers who lived there was in a class with my older brother at some point in time, like that sort of connection. But my next door neighbors are really challenging my focus. Just music at all times of night, arguments you can like hear through the wall. We had our sort of like front porch, situation. You come outside the door, it's always people that's sitting on our stoop. You know what I'm saying? Not on their stoop. Now we got kids, their toys, and Capri Sun pouches all over our stoop. And I'm writing about how to transform Black education, right, for Black children. And I'm incredibly annoyed at the Black family that lives next door to me. So the day I'm supposed to defend my master's thesis after I hadn't spent all these nights, working on this through all the noise coming through the wall, I realized that I had to drop the script. I couldn't perform that piece because the idea of it was a lie. It's like, yo, I'm trying to transform Black education. And at the same time, I step outside and I actively like am annoyed. And I mean, at the time, I would say like I hated my neighbors. My Black neighbor, I hated them, and I'm talking about how we transform education. So the dissertation project it begins from me trying to wrestle with Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. would say, "Theory without practice ain't shit." Like this idea that a lot of us are in these spaces, these academic spaces, spouting what we think needs to change in our community. But when we go outside, nobody knows you. No one listens to you. You don't have an understanding of what's going on in the neighborhood. What are your relationships to the people around you, right? But we think that by focusing on the book and the archives that we are effectively doing the work, when really it's the people, right? It's people that transform us. We have to transform ourselves and work transforming other people. And the dissertation project is really about that. It's about if we are trying to transform education, we must be about transforming ourselves. So, what are the stories that people offer us? I'm not in Chester anymore, I'm in West Philadelphia, but I'm thinking through like, what do the stories of the everyday folks in our community say about who we are, where our community is, what our visions are for what's possible, and what does it mean to actually do something with those visions, with those everyday folk? To be able to build some form of infrastructure, some form of a platform, to be able to actually live out those dreams. And there's a lot of theory and other readings and other things into it. But I think overall, that's what I'm just trying to do with the dissertation project.
Oftentimes, if the theorists were to step outside like you did into the real world, they would find that many of the things that they need to be theorizing on are already been theorized on by the community, and that they've decided that they can figure a way to solve a problem because they're the practitioners of problem solving. And is that something that you found when you decided, you know what, I'm going to step outside the archive, I'm going to step outside of the literature into the community to dig deeper into where the practitioners are finding ways to solve their problems? Is that what you found to be true?
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who knows me would say I never stepped outside the literature. I'm still deeply in it, the poetry that exists in the community, recognizing it as such, as truth, as the communities, like you said, the community theorizing. And then I'm always like doing a historical sort of like back and forth of like, oh yeah, this is nothing but what happened in the 60s. This is nothing but what was happening in the 20s. This is nothing but what's happening in Angola with Amilcar Cabral. This is nothing but what's happening in Haiti with the Haitian Revolution. You making these connections of like, yeah, I think if we're honest about the sort of like feelings, these feelings open us up to a lot of historical connections. So like that part was like really important for me. I think the other part, about like the solutions thing is like, yeah, the technocrats. I needed to get away from those folks, really, and I'm happy for the people who allow me the space to kind of find my way out of that. People who just try to come up, they get to the community meeting and want to tell everybody what the heck needs to be done, which is why people get mad at me to this day because I go like, yo, can you just call me Chris? I don't need to do the whole doctor thing because I just want to be at the community meeting. Don't make me the front and center person at it. I need to be able to hear what everyone else has to offer to figure out the threads of the relationships that it will take to actually execute whatever we're going to envision. Because the technocrat has that ego about the vision or like, oh, we could do this. The idea is what, 15, 20% at most of it. You know what I mean? It's the work, it's the consistency, it's the relational side. Those are the things that actually get things done. But the technocrat, they don't see that. They just think, oh, let me just put this research report in front of your face. Who cares?
One of the things I find interesting is that you have the technocrat, you have the bureaucrat, you have the folks that are sort of outside of the space. And when I say step outside the literature or step away from, I merely mean you have that framework, just like a technocrat has the framework, a bureaucrat has the framework, but then there is a reality of how it really works for the people on the ground. So you can always go back to the literature. It does frame the way in which we maneuver in life and the way things work around us. And there's a historical record, I would argue, for why the literature has a purpose. But when it comes to actually doing the work, that is something that's done from outside of that space. And it seems like you've been able to marry these two together to be in
I
that.
did get married
I
2022.
know, I know you got married. Congratulations. You got a PhD, you got married. I mean, you're a rock star. I'm following you on Facebook. I'm like, "Oh, I wasn't invited," but I was really happy. Your wife is beautiful and the pictures were
Oh,
great. I
thank
was
you.
like, "Oh, my little Christopher has grown up to be this really amazing person." But I
Yeah.
was just
I remember those old Chester Co-op days.
remember the co-op? Do you remember when we did our sit-in,
Yes.
at Senator Pileggi's office? Oh, that
Oh
was
my God. My family was going to kill me for that.
my family too, and that guy came into, I think he wanted to kill us. He was so calm, but you could tell the veins in his neck were popping because I think we were there for about a good 6 hours before we left. But
Yeah.
we were there protesting, for education in the city of Chester.
I got this lecture. I'm doing this lecture in Chester pretty soon. Is it safe to talk about Pelechi now? Or am
I
I still
think
threatening all my like things?
he's a public figure. I think it's safe to talk about Pileggi now. Yeah.
Well, you know how Chester is. You think things are safe to talk about, then you end up getting fired.
Yes, I do know that. That happened to me. I did get fired from my job for asking about the casino and how it was going to impact the city of Chester when it wouldn't hire folks with a criminal record. I remember that. It was just a curiosity question, like, how is this going to work for the people here who actually don't qualify because of their criminal history? That was with Governor Randall. He shut down the press conference after my question, and then I was fired from my job. So,
Oh, I
no.
I got a good story on this one. I
Mm,
bring it even more closer to home. My father transitioned when I was pretty young, still in high school. His best friend, he was a treasurer for Thaddeus Kirkland's campaign throughout my entire childhood. He's his best, like one of his best friends. Go back to like high school together. Thaddeus Kirkland eulogized my father I get a job to being the project manager for Chester May. It was held by an outside institution, but like $300,000 or something like that to do community engagement in the city of Chester. Like, it was like a partnership where I had an office in City Hall. I'm like, bet, let's go, let's do it. I'm trying to host a community meeting, had some different blocks for different reasons on that. So one day I'm walking around City Hall, and they got this sign up. It was right after the 13th documentary by Ava DuVernay comes out, right? So there's this sign up, and it says, wanted criminals, $5,000.
No.
Chester is a space where we love our people, but we hate criminals. So I went to Facebook and I had a question because I feel like, everybody in Chester is related. We all know each other. And I was like, who's the criminal? Because I feel like everybody family
We got at least one.
got somebody. So when you say that we hate these people, that I don't know, that just reminds me of like the 13th where it was like, who's a human being and who's still sort of like seen as a slave. I feel
Yeah.
like we're reproducing that. I just posted this on Facebook. It might have got like 10 likes, 2 shares. Next thing you know, I get pulled into a meeting on the day I return to work. Oh, they gonna fire you. I said, what did I do? They pulled up the Facebook post. I said, but did you read it? I'm still looking for an answer to the question. I don't know if there's been an answer yet. So they didn't fire me at that moment. I ended up getting fired maybe 2 months later. But it was just like one of those things where it was like, I know everybody here. I grew up in the city. Y'all know me. Why are y'all acting like I'm doing something different?
Yeah, this is who you are. No, but I mean, that's the thing, right? It's sort of challenging institutions or challenging people in power to think about the things that they're saying and what they're doing. I think that's one of the things I find very disheartening on the one hand is that when you're in community with the people that you grew up with or people that know you or should know you, when you push and ask questions that are logical questions, that the response to that is, you can't be here when you should be there, because if we can't ask each other these questions, who else can ask these questions? And if we can't ask the questions, how are we supposed to help us understand how our communities are and what our communities can be? The politics of being willing to challenge a notion is real.
Yeah, I get you more specific on that, right? I remember meeting with, let's say, high level Chester administrators and saying simply, hey, y'all, we got all this money to like do something to like create like a shift in how we do community work in this city. What I would like to do is just have a town hall. But in order to actually have the town hall, we got to be willing to be honest because we all were raised in this city and we all remember all the things. So if we can't put those things on the table, we're not going to get anywhere new. We're just going to keep having the same old argument at every town hall. So all I'm asking is that if we have a town hall, would folks be willing to give us like the actual answer, or are they just going to run the political agenda of today?
What did they say?
They said, Chris, you get out of this meeting. Chris, you go back to where you was at. You already know what the answer to that question is. I don't know why you even in here. I said, what? How I'm supposed to do the actual work that we signed on to do if we can't put our actual selves on the table? We're not going to move anything.
That's the point. They're not going to do anything. They don't want to do anything. And that's the political side of things. And then you have the community activism part of things where people are pushing. In Chester, I find that the community and the politics tend to be in alignment with one another to a certain extent. Where that pushback, what you are trying to do to say, let's put ourselves on the line, gets pushed back by people who are also from the community activist side of Chester, who are now on the political side of Chester, not willing to move that needle or to challenge the paradigm that they have fought against. that they have seen has not served the community well. I'm curious why now you're in West Philadelphia and you're still doing direct community work around the conservation of historical sites, the Paul Robeson House, the Tanner House. How's it going as far as creating that space, establishing those connections historically, culturally, to a broader audience and to a new generation of folks who may not have understood or known the significance of these historical sites and the figures who occupy those spaces?
So I'll get to the Philly part. Can I do one more Chester story though
Yeah,
before?
yeah, yeah, for sure. Go ahead.
All right. Yeah. So and like on that note about like the pushing, not too long ago I did a talk at Jubilee School in West Philadelphia for fourth graders. And they were asking me about, well, when did you realize that you were like an activist? And I recounted to them that I got kicked out of Miss Beverly's African American history class at Chester High School. We were in 11th or 12th grade. And this is post No Child Left Behind. And I'll come back to that in a minute. And Miss Beverly is asking us to do a vocabulary exam. I'm like, we are in 12th grade. Why why am I learning how to spell segregation and not learning the history of it? She kicked me out. You talk about like that pushing, right? So then the young people said, well, like, yeah, that's wrong. She was wrong. And I had to come back to say like, oh, but I'm missing out the part around No Child Left Behind, right? And the sort of like institutional power, the sort of like structural power that is on Miss Beverly's back, right? That like part of what she's doing there is test prep.
Yeah.
She has to get us ready for the PSSA test because the PSSA test is the thing that is determining whether our school is going to be funded or not. So me pushing back against Miss Beverly is really, I mean, it took me time to feel like this, but maybe she could have, I don't know if she's seen it, would be like, Chris, what you're really mad at is the structure of how education is done. And we don't determine that thing in Chester. That's not
Yeah.
determined in Chester. That's a Harrisburg and federal and a lot of corporation type of conversations. But you giving this to me. And that's where I think a lot of the push comes from. So I think one of the things that I've been challenging myself now in Chester is to realize like a lot of the infighting that we have is from a lack of clarity and awareness of the powers above and beyond Chester and how those things condition the choices that we believe that we can make. And that has been the part that I think history and getting deeper into the literature and history has really helped me with and learning through these different platforms and historical projects that I'm a part of like, how do we talk about the context in which many of these people are working? You take somebody like Paul Robeson. This is a global figure of anti-colonial struggle who is a habitual line stepper, starting like me. And what is the conditions that he's navigating to make these sort of like systemic and structural critiques? Well, at the same time, building across and building these relationships with others to build a force of what transforming these conditions look like. And so I have to forgive myself at times for like the times in which I was just mad at a person who were playing out instructions that they might have inherited. And I guess I'm being optimistic to say that they chose them and figuring out like, what else can be done. So a lot of the history work and the institution building of the history work is saying, yo, how do we talk about the choices that we have available to us and recognizing that the choices that we make possible is very different from the choices that the state and market structure wants us to be able to choose from. How have we made change, built institutions that created more choices that are available to us, maybe healthier choices, better choices? And how do you begin to democratize that work, right? By saying, you know, yeah, I don't think any of us are going to be Paul Robeson altogether. But if we look at Paul Robeson's legacy, he's someone who chose to stand and that we need to choose sides. And I think we do have the power to choose sides. So my long work there has been about that. I mean, the Tanner House is where I'm at now. We look at the legacy of the Tanner family that lived in 2908 West Diamond Street, this row house in Strawberry Mansion, which is now a majority working class Black neighborhood. They have incredible accomplishments all across the legacies of faith, family, freedom, arts, health, and education. All those things represents building blocks to what I believe to be thriving neighborhoods. So how, in looking at their lives as possibility models, how can we recreate that? What would it look like, as our survey said, what would it look like for love to thrive in this neighborhood again?
The structural boundaries in Miss Beverly's thinking or understanding. I call it structural because it is a construct. We constructed something that says this is the way it works and therefore this is what we'll do, but not fully understanding that the structure of it is something that is outside of our control unless we then decide that we go in and understand what's in our control. And so one of the things, as I've been following the work that you've been doing at the Robeson House in particular, because you've done a lot of cultural events, but having this dialogue around re-engaging community, centering history, culture, with that identity of defiance in a sense. I mean, I think that's what Paul Robeson means for me. Someone who defied the structure that was put in place for him to follow as a Black man in America, as a artist, as a sportsman, of all the Renaissance characteristics of any human being. He held all of them, but was to say that we can go outside of that. But I do think people forget that we're angry with people, like you said, but not angry with the system, that we're not angry with the structure that's been placed before us to say this is how it works. And in the work that you're doing, what I like is that you are creating that space for these conversations. And I think it's a conversation, given the current political reality in the US, that people are now understanding that there's a structure in place that we should be mad at. But now people are mad at people and not the system. I think from a Black perspective, because, what it means to have a structure that limits our ability to live and create the world that we want to live in and be in, compared to what the rest of the United States is facing and thinking, oh, we're feeling oppressed, right? We're feeling like democracy
Right.
is no longer working, and yet we've experienced that our democratic process doesn't always work for us. So I'm just curious if you see or have been thinking about that in the broader scope of the work that you're doing.
Yeah. Oh, so this is good. And I just pulled up my dissertation to look at the acknowledgments. The acknowledgments was me like, one, I'm trying to turn in a dissertation. I'm not doing this whole thing of listing everyone in the world that I've ever met that gave something to me. I just wanted to do something that was quick. So I found a couple quotes that really sort of like spoke to that. And the first one I think is important as subtext, but I think the second one really answers the part. The first one is from Francois Vergès. Her country was colonized by the French. I think she's from Reunion. Incredible radical feminist. She says, to write is to owe a debt to all the authors of books, poems, novels, films, art installations, and to the activists who have explored, analyzed, theorized class, race, and gender-based colonial, imperialist, capitalist, sexist, and sexual oppression. I hereby acknowledge my debt. It is immense. And the second one is from one of my favorite people, Kalamu Yasalam, out of New Orleans. He says, we must remember the battle is not really about fighting our oppressors and exploiters, although we know that such fights are often necessary. The real battle is to improve ourselves and to make the world a better place. Actualizing love of each other, that is the ultimate goal, the organizing principle, and the guide for when and how to fight. That part was the part that really landed for me. I had to get out of a conversation last week of, folks who are so ready to do an action. And I'm like, hold up, but what are we actually trying to build here? Like, what's the solution that we're trying to do? And what is our power in actually presenting and doing the homework on what that solution is before we go out and yell at somebody to do a thing? I think there's some necessary homework around what are the alternatives, and we can go into history and find historical alternatives, right? There's one way of looking at, even look like Cabral and the PIGC and that revolution. There's one way of looking at the struggle against the sort of colonialists, but it's also remembering that they were driven by trying to create a new society. And what were to be the values and structures of that society? Same way with Nkrumah, in Ghana, who also spent some time in Chester. I learned that. That vision, it's an unfinished process. And I'll try to be a good Marxist. It's an unfinished process, and we're always working through these contradictions. I don't divorce myself from that work. I see people critique is no substitute for organizing. Another phrase that I always say. So, like Miss Beverly would say, "I'm too smart for my own damn good." I think what she meant by that is like, you question stuff, but show us the work. You got to show and prove, and let the work speak louder than your voice. And I would hope where I'm at now is somewhere close to that. Still talk a lot of shit on social media, but I hope with the different institutions and projects that I've been a part of, it's showing the possibility of something, like the seeds of something to come that is more healthy, that is more relational, that is tied to our human needs than the stuff I'm actively trying to shut down.
You work with movement leaders. Is it part of that work is to center them or anchor them in an understanding of what it means to use your voice, but to also elevate that voice by having a plan towards solutions? Historically, that's what it's been. Like, you don't just go out and yell, you have a plan. It's strategic. There's a need for the new movement leaders or movement leaders in general to elevate voice, but to also elevate it higher by being strategic towards solutions.
Yeah, the abolition school, the W.E.B. Du Bois Movement School for Abolition and Reconstruction, which we shorten the abolition school, is, yes, about working with movement leaders. Leaders is probably not the right word. Organizers, workers. One of the things is, one, we need to inform, clarify, and enrich our vocabulary of resistance, which is a phrase from Avery Gordon. We need to just figure out how to get each other on the same page, because a lot of us are saying things but meaning different things. In order to effectively move strategy, we need to be on the one together. So part of it is just figuring out, all right, how to get an awareness of each other. Then I think the other part, right, is deepening it through historical study, case study, and internationalist practice. Yo, there are people all around the world who are working on mobilizing through many of these same contradictions that we face, both presently but also historically. So how can we draw on that wealth of examples of experiments and use them to inform strategy? Abolition school is kind of really a space for that. I think other than that, it's also a space of like, what does political education or radical study and struggle look like today? And trying to figure out a bit of like systematic approach to doing it that is like multi-tendency. We're not asking people to sign up for one particular political program or one another, but we do have our sort of four principles of being abolitionist, being internationalist, being intersectional in our analysis, well as participatory, or as Ruth Wilson Gilmore might say, knowing that practice makes different. It is about practice. So like those are like the things. We went from within, kind of started as me trying to figure out a tax shelter from all the other work that I was doing. These 1099s, you know what I mean? They was getting me. So I was
They
like, man,
always
I need
do.
something. I need something. Then I started to sort of like world build around it. But the we went from within itself is Zora Neale Hurston, and she's talking about High John the Conqueror and Black folk legend, right? And it reads, and all the time there was High John the Conqueror playing his tricks of making a way out of no way, hitting a straight lick with a crooked stick, winning the jackpot with no other stake but a laugh, fighting a mighty battle without outside showing force, and winning his war from within. Really winning in a permanent way, for he was winning with the soul of the black man whole and free, so that he could use it afterwards. For what shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his own soul? You would have nothing but a cruel, vengeful, grasping monster to come to power. John the Conqueror was a bottom fish. He was deep. He had the wisdom tooth of the East in his head, way over there where the sun rises a day ahead of time. They say that heaven arms with love and laughter those it does not wish to see destroyed. He who carries his heart and his sword must perish. That's a sentence. He who carries his hurt heart and his sword must perish. So says the ultimate law. High John the Conqueror knew a lot of things like that. He who wins from within is in the B class. Be here when the ruthless man comes, and be here when he is gone. So I thought that was like a fitting joint to name my LLC after. And maybe folks will read Zora Neale Hurston a bit more.
I love her. She's one of my top 5 authors. Her analysis of the human condition, and in particular the Black human condition, is excellent, because as a sociologist, getting out there, working with the people and talking and documenting those stories during the Depression and just making it real, and then writing her literature and her novels to bring that point home has really affected me as a person. So when I actually saw that on your website, I'm like, oh, he's a Zora Neale Hurston fan. I love this. I knew we were kindred spirits. So, but I do think that quote is spot on. And it's something for me that I think about, and how to push forward and push through, because I'm one of those people who I always ask questions like, what's the solution? I understand there's a problem. I see that there's a problem. I experience the impact of the problem, but I want to know what's the solution. So I'll create space, hold space for the bitching and moaning and venting, but I cannot live in that space if we're not moving towards solving for solutions. And for me, a solution is not a solution to bringing us back to where we felt comfortable. A solution for me is bringing us forward to where there's discomfort, but that we're making changes, that we're actually evolving in our expectations of a solution to create systems that address the things that we know that are wrong, or don't work, or ineffective, or oppressive, or alienating and isolating. And I find that right now, in the current state of things, that this is a really wonderful opportunity for us to be strategizing on how do we take advantage of this chaos and really push forward for a system that is more, it's based on equity, that is justice based and focused, and moves us to the aspirational goal that we all have held for many years, for generations. How do we get closer? I don't see how we move beyond this moment in time to where we are solving problems if we can't see forward, if we can't be forward thinking, and where are the opportunities to create new solutions. I'm not sure if you agree with that, but I just
Well,
wanted to
the
say,
forward is it's not it's the forward thinking part. It's also like the Sankofa principle or something. Like sometimes we got to go backward. You know what I mean? It's a dance. You know, you got to go backward to go forward. You know what I mean? Like it's. I think it it has to be different than quote unquote innovation, right? Because that can kind of like I think of. Well, I grew up in Chester. I grew up in Chester Upland Schools. Every year, the state had a new forward thinking idea about what they were going to do with our schools, and they would give it to a corporation. They would try out this experiment, try out this experiment. And I'm like, whoa, we're not dealing with the root of the issue. We need to go back to the root. There's that part that's in it for me. You know, I am on a computer right now, so it allows me the ability to kind of like pull up different references. And one of the things that you mentioned there, it reminds me of a thing that I come back to often, the Allied Media Network principles. They're out of Detroit. Interesting enough, when I was working at Chester Community Charter School, overseeing a arts program, and I had imported some of their stuff from Detroit into the schools to kind of practice with. But the network principles I think are really important. We begin by listening. We are making an honest attempt to solve the most significant problems of our day. We are building a network of people and organizations that are developing long-term solutions based on the immediate confrontation of our most pressing problems. Wherever there is a problem, there are already people acting on the problem in some fashion. Understanding those actions is the starting point for developing effective strategies to resolve the problem. So we focus on the solutions, not the problems. We emphasize our own power and legitimacy. We presume our power, not our powerlessness. We spend more time building than attacking. We focus on strategies rather than issues. The strongest solutions happen through the process, not in a moment at the end of the process. There's a couple more. Anybody who's listening, I hope they look them up. Allied Media Network principles.
And thanks for reading that, because for me, as part of the questions, I focus on what is the narrative of how we talk about our problem? How do we talk about our solution? I'm 100% in agreement that we should always go back to the root. But I'm also very clear that in that root, there can be offshoots of that root. It doesn't mean that they have
I'm down.
left.
I'm down with that. I'm down with that
Yeah,
metaphor.
yeah, right? Like they're offshoots. And if we can find our way to those offshoots centered in that rootness of where we are, where things are, then we can come with solutions. I agree with you on the term innovation. I don't believe innovation equals solution. I do not believe that those two words are synonymous, because the solution really is, for me in this context of our conversation, how do we together create the way in which we want to move towards something that resembles the thing that we feel brings us to a place that is forward thinking, that's beyond the space of we're stuck on a hamster wheel spinning around doing the same thing, expecting a different result. I don't even think that's insanity. I just think it's ineffective. It's ineffective. Where do you see in the work that you're doing, in the space that you're holding, corrupting young minds with your line stepping at Haverford College? Where do you see this opportunity to really push forward in the movement spaces, ideologies that are focused on the root and strategy towards solution? How does that work for you? Or does it?
Yeah, one, I don't line step at Harvard. I don't line step at Haverford College. That's where my insurance and health insurance and all those things come from. I need those. My doctor saw my insurance card and was like, "This is really great." And I
Don't
was
lose
like,
it.
"Okay, Chris, keep it together. Don't do what you usually do." Yeah,
This is a plug for why we need universal health care. So
that's true.
so we can line step.
Um, you go to my Instagram. One of the quote that I have on there is from Gwendolyn Brooks, one of my favorite poets. You talk about
Mine
like
too.
Darnell Hurston's in your top five. Um, Gwendolyn Brooks
Gwen,
might be in my top three,
she's
and she's not
amazing.
three. Um, she says, live not for battles won, live not for the end of the song, live in the along. It's a process. We live in the process of recognizing contradictions. I'm a, historical materialist, a dialectical materialist at heart in some ways. Like looking at the contradiction, figuring out, okay, we have some principles that we believe that inform the design of a potential, what Rufus and Gilmore say, a provincial resolution, a place that we can trust and try trusting for a while. So what is that? What does that look like? Let's experiment with it. Let's figure out if we have the tools and the capacity and the people enough to be able to try something different and see what lessons come out of that, right? Have it informed by historical example, but also be documenting what we're doing so that we can pass that along to somebody. You know what I mean? And then, You know, we try it, we see what happens. We recognize that we're always in protracted struggle. There's certain antagonistic contradictions we can't really change without having like a huge, massive revolution. But there is still a space, some degrees of freedom to kind of like work with. So let's try some shit. And that's as far as I go and work. And then we write about it, we document it. And I saw this thing from Tupac the other day, and certainly I won't be never as influential as him. He was like, "Yo, I don't think I'm gonna change the world, but I know what I'm saying will spark the mind that will change the world." What I'm hoping is, like, I ain't gonna say it's gonna spark the mind, but at least whoever is them people that change the world be like, "Yo, Chris was onto something, possibly." Like, I hope. You know what I mean? That's all I
Yeah.
can pray for.
No, I think that you are onto something, and I think that that's part of it. It's the work that you do and many others that are I am going to use the word revolutionary thinkers because it's about disrupting what we're comfortable with. And for me, that's revolutionary because you're putting yourself out in spaces, challenging systems, challenging the status quo, challenging the comfort zone of many people to say, let's think differently, let's act differently, let's do things differently. That if not an ember, if not a spark, at some point it will be a blaze, but it's a start, right? Maybe it's the flint. Maybe it's just the beginning
Yeah,
of before the fire starts, but that's necessary. Without it, we don't have the flame that pushes people. It's the thing that is the
right,
heat
right,
that
right.
makes people move. I think that you're doing really wonderful work.
I appreciate that. I
Great.
got to throw in my elder, Kim Holder. He's a veteran Black Panther. He said this thing to me on Facebook. He says, "A revolutionary isn't some mystical superhero, which none of us can achieve. A revolutionary is a living, breathing human being who can make mistakes and at times be undisciplined, but who is dedicated to two things: the well being of their people and the total destruction of oppressive institutions." So I totally agree with you in that sense. We throw that term around, it's a very loaded term, but from someone who's a veteran Black Panther who's been on the front lines with that, I can live with that. So, but back to what you were saying. What you saying?
I'm just saying that's how I see you. I just see that the work that you're doing is transformative. And even though we are not in the same space any longer, it affects me and the way I think. And, I check out your book list when you go to the bookstore and you have the books that you've purchased. I'm on it. I'm like, okay, I need to add that to my library. So for me, it's been very influential. And it just makes me really proud to know that you're out in the world doing this work because it's necessary. I wish that it wasn't necessary. I wish that we were already there, but we know that we're not. And you're doing the necessary good work. And so I want to say thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
I
Yeah.
appreciate you.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
I wanted to have this conversation with Chris today because it's important to remember that ordinary people can create extraordinary change. Democracy isn't something that comes from the top down. It's built from the ground up. Political change happens when people demand it, engage in it, and fight for it. If you're unsure where to start on your own, there are countless opportunities within your local community to become a change agent. Marching, voting, organizing, these are all essential. Building community is about building power. And if we don't start at the place of building power, we never can have the transformational democracy that we require in our current political environment. I hope to hear from you about what you're doing out there in the world to ensure that it reflects the vision you have for yourself and the future. Send me an email to tina@patternchangelab.com and tell me some of the stories of how you're getting engaged in your communities. Join me next week when I'll be in conversation with Professor of Theology, Mark Wallace. We will be discussing how religion shapes modern democracy. Talk with you then.